Okay, you should unchat. I want to welcome you to the third of our Story Court events. It's a pleasure to see so many people here this evening. Those of us who have been coming to these events have had the opportunity to hear really a lot of interesting stories about growing up in Salem and in the area. Before we get into our speakers tonight, though, there is one person I want to recognize, and that is Rachel. Was initiated, and that is going to continue. We talked about it today, so we wanted to continue. So again, Rachel, on behalf of Herb Perkins, who could not be here tonight. Herb is the president of the courthouse. He had another event, but we want to thank you for all the work that you have put in, and congratulate you in your new job, and best wishes to you in the future.
And I'm so thankful to have met so many neat people here in Salem. It's been awesome, especially my first boss here, Bob Ackland, and the hostess with the mostest, Carolyn Ackland. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, for the our speakers tonight, we'll go with ladies first. Just give us your name and where you were born, and then you can go into your talk and tell us all about your life.
We don't have enough time. My name is Kay Russell, Kay Barkley Russell, if any of you remember the Barkley family here. I was born in Cambridge Hospital.
How many years ago was that? Only a few.
It was a day or two ago. Yes. I had a wonderful childhood in Salem, and I can talk about it at length, but when I was a kid, the center of town was bustling and busy, and there was always something going on. And my parents were generally in the middle of it. For a while, I was an only child, and I got that inner look where I was just paying attention to what happened to me. The rest of the world went by. Some of my memories are from pictures, but most of them involved the school and whatever business my parents were in, because when I was in elementary school, they were running the hotel, Central House. By the time I was in high school, they were moving on to other things, and they opened up the 5 and 10, and my father became the postmaster. So I was lucky. I lived in town, but I had grandparents in the country, so when they wanted to ship me off, I went to a farm. So I got the best of both worlds.
Could you tell us a little bit about the post office and how it grew in Salem? I remember seeing a picture of the new building when it was built, but where was it before then? Do you remember?
I don't really recall where it was before then. Jim does.
In the Bancroft Library, wasn't it?
It was in the Profit Building.
The Profit
Yeah.
Building.
Profit Hall.
Yeah.
In the corner.
That's where it was when I came to Salem. Yeah, Bob would know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, in the store business, I know when Sarah Jane and I came to Salem, I think the store was still there, wasn't it?
5 and 10.
The 5 and 10 was
Yeah.
still there.
Yeah.
Could you tell us, 5 and 10s, everybody knows what a 5 and 10 cent store is. It seems, in fact, there are even a few still around, I think. Could you tell us a little bit, your recollections of what the 5 and 10 was like in Salem?
Before my parents got it, the 5 and 10 was owned by some brothers, I think. Herdman. Yeah, Herdman was their name. And that's where kids could go in and buy a comic book, take it home and read it, and come back and trade it in for another one for a dime or something. So that's my biggest recollection of that, because it was a typical general kind of a store. Very different from what my mother did with it when she had it, but it was there were lots of little things there that kids could afford too, and of course they had penny candies and stuff. And then when my parents bought it, not long, it was in the place where the bank, the Glens Falls National Bank is right now. But before, they were even there before the Grand Union was parked there. So they moved over to where Laura's Garden is, to that store there. And I think they had the whole ground floor because it was bigger than when you go in Laura's. I can see there's a wall where there used to be space. So it was a neat store, and Mom sold stuff that like fabrics and notions and things like that, because there had been a store that sold all that stuff, and she had worked for that woman, but the store was gone, so Mom was selling from the 5 and 10. She was selling stuff that they sold in this special store for seamstresses. I'm trying to think of the 5 and 10 when Mom took over she ran the 5 and 10, and Dad was, by then he'd become a postmaster, and I'm presuming he was doing the books. So, best I can do there.
People have asked me about Main Street, and they've said, gee, a lot of empty places on Main Street, we're in hard times. But yet I know Main Street was once a really busy place. Can you remember some of the other stores that were, what was available on Main Street?
Almost anything you wanted.
Kate,
Yeah.
did you know Ken's
Thelma
Landers?
I sure did, yeah.
She had a store on
Yeah.
Main Street.
Yes, she did.
Like a clothing
Yeah.
store, wasn't it?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, she used to order clothes for Mom.
Women's clothing.
Yeah. Tarantino's had a grocery store. McNeil's had a grocery store. Excuse me.
Avery's.
Avery's, yeah.
Avery and Helen.
Yeah, and then the Raps had a bakery. And what I remember about all of those businesses was that they all had kids. They all had kids. We played in the backyards of all of those stores and businesses that were on Main Street. Nobody was watching us.
Oh, they were.
They really were the good old days.
The village, remember? Everyone knew each other. So.
Yeah. If you got out of line, somebody was going to see it.
Uh-huh.
Right, before cell phones, we had clotheslines. What about some of the other services like barber shops or gas stations or things of that sort?
Yeah.
You must have had them.
Wasn't there a theater
Yeah.
at some point?
Yeah, there was a movie theater where the health clinic is now. And I lived across the street from that, so I don't remember whether it was Friday or Saturday, but one night every weekend, you could go to the movies and see a double feature for 25 cents. I told you I was old.
I hate to contradict you. It was 17. And I had 8 cents to buy candy with.
Yeah, there was a candy store right back next to the,
That's it.
yeah, there was a candy store next to the movie theater, so you stop there first and then you go in. It was a tough life we had.
At one time, there were 3 barbershops on Main Street.
3, wow. Who were they?
A fellow by the name of Robinson was in where the art gallery is now. He used to come over from Shushan. He worked Shushan, and then he'd come up here and spend a day or two. And my grandfather had a barber shop in the arcade of that movie house. And when that burned, he had to move a couple of doors up on the other side of Sergano's candy store, where there was an appliance store in there at one time, years ago. But the shop that someone mentioned is Thelma Landers, was in the Leyden block that burned in, I think it was 69, the winter of 69. I was teaching up in Hartford, And I was in the firehouse with the Boy Scouts, or Cub Scouts, I guess it was, at a meeting, and it came over the radio that there was a dreadful fire on the main street in Salem. And it took out Charlie McNeil's grocery store, a drugstore on the other end of the building, Harley Parrish's barber shop, and Thelma Lander's dress shop, and the whole top floor, which were apartments at the time.
Lived up above, yeah.
And that's where the gazebo is right now.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of buildings there.
We used to play football in the back of that block, because the barbers all lived up there, Jack, Emo, Fritz, all of them. And you gathered where you could find enough people to play a game. And we had to move all the time. We had the nicest football field to play on at the school, and then in 1955 they built an elementary school there, and we had to find another one. So we went down to what's now the theater, and we played on that lawn. Nobody seemed to own it or care, and we just played and played. And eventually the people on the church board put a monument there to discourage it. But it didn't stop us. We played anyway. And then we wound up playing in the parking lot behind the Catholic church. And you played with, I think I started when I was about 9 or 10, and in the game you'd have somebody 15, 16, and everything in between, because you just didn't have enough kids.
So was that known as the ecumenical football team?
That's right.
Church
We spread ourselves around. And the third barbershop on Main Street was Mike Capuana, and he was in where the upholstery people are right now. After Albert Ionelli retired from, he was a tailor and was in there. And once he retired, Mike moved his barbershop into there. I don't know where he was before, but the Capuanas were prominent in the town. Guy, the father, was a shoemaker, and he had, in that, where your folks 5 and 10 was, he had a little shoe shop right there where he could restore a shoe or take care of a shoe or just get your shoes shined. You could go in there. And we had a plethorous group of bars. There was the tavern, and there was the hotel, and there was Jay Green's in the next building.
Yeah, right next door to each other,
Yeah.
right across the street.
And the Cambridge band on the 4th of July, when the parade was over, would parade between those 3 bars. And it would go on till 9 or 10 o'clock at night.
Drinking sarsaparilla, right?
Yeah, right.
Of course.
And the next building down was Miller McMorris's Star Motor Sales. He sold Kaiser and Fraser cars. And he had the first television to sell in Salem, I think. And on Friday nights, because the boxing came on at 10 o'clock, he would set it up in the store window, turn it on, and leave. And I guess at about 11:30 maybe he'd come back after everyone had gone home. Because there'd be a big crowd on the sidewalk watching that fight that night. And yeah, a little tiny screen, right. And it was quite a wonder at that time. I think I was just about old enough to be up and around at that time.
Jack, this is Jack Phillips, by the way. Now, what about doctors? We're in a situation now in our community where living in a rural area, Mary McClellan Hospital is closed. It makes it difficult for us to sometimes get the medical help we need quickly. Were there doctors here when you?
Yes, there was. There was a doctor who lived where Town of Worky lives. And for the moment, it's escaping my memory, but,
Was it Ezel?
pardon me?
No.
Ezel?
It was before
Fink.
Dr.
Was it
Rizal.
Fink?
Oh, way before Dr. Rizal and
Remember
before
that name.
Dr. Fink.
Remember that name?
And before Dr.
There was a Dr. Orton.
Dr. Orton was the original. He operated out of where TD Bank was. He was attached to that and next door to the hardware store, right? You remember that probably, don't you? Doc Orton's office?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah. And
There were three, Dr. Mates,
Dr. who?
Mates.
I don't, that's before my time. But the one up here on Broadway, I'll tell you a quick story. I was at the swimming pool one day, and
You better tell them where that was.
Yeah.
everybody's probably thinking I'm crazy, but Salem had a pool in 1947. It was built by the community. Bob Canal was kind of the steering rudder of it, but the firemen did all the work. And it was made out of a concrete floor. It was about 70 to 80 feet long and probably 40 feet, not 40, 35 feet maybe wide. And it had a shallow end. And I hadn't started my schooling yet. I was 5 years old, but it was in the summer of that year when a car, 34 Chevy, pulled into the parking lot up in the yard up there, and the brake cut loose, and it was coming. Everybody was running around screaming and hollering, and I found out they were screaming at me because it was headed for me. And I thought, what are they talking about? And then when I turned around, I found out it was on its way in, and it did. It went right over me.
Oh.
And Frank Converse was filling in for Bob Canal that summer. And he got down under the car and dragged me out of it and picked me up and ran me up to this doctor in Tano's house, who I cannot think. He was a young doctor, too. But my mother was at home, and Frank stayed with me. And I got a scratch over my one eye. I had bandages on both knees and on both elbows. And when my mother saw me, she almost passed out. And I was fine. I mean, I was scared, terrified really, but I was really lucky.
Where was the pool?
The pool was located, you may know where our new music teacher, is it Zach?
Zach
Zach Eastman.
What was a
they
nursing
used-
home then?
It was a nursing home at that time, yes.
Where?
And,
Where's that?
South Salem.
Since you're coming into town.
It's a little creek
Do you
known
know
as,
where the pizza place is?
Yeah.
historically it was known as
Before,
Trout
on the
Creek.
other side of the street.
Trout
It
Creek.
ran right down through there.
It was cold.
It was very cold, and when you first filled it, it was clear. You could see the bottom, and it was, and the walls were made of wood, and they had to, I think twice in the summer they would pump it out and get all the mud and muck down on the far end, and then they'd pick it out with, I don't know if they had backhoes then, but I think we wheelbarrowed it out. And when you were in high school, you got a week's work when school closed, because that's what you did, and you replaced a section of planks on the walls. And it had a diving board and so on. I later spent 5 years teaching swimming and lifeguarding at that pool. So later in life, I found myself working around swimming pools. But if we could have had the filters in those days that we had these days, it could have been a really nice operation, but it could have been made of different materials.
Yeah.
Such as
Staying with medicine, and I can't remember her name, there was a nurse in the village.
Ruby Tyler,
That's it.
and I got an email from Jimmy today down in Delaware. He said, I hope you tell some good stories because I'll be following it. So, anyway, Jim's always been supportive, and Ruby wound up taking good care of my father when he was bedridden by the time I got to high school. And she would come 2 or 3 days a week and bathe him and so on. But when she died, the community really lost a star. But we did have doctors. Dr. Fink sent me down from a basketball game when I was about a junior because I had gotten the measles and I wasn't allowed to go to the game or to play. And that's the way it is. Or was.
Just to let you know, we do have Ruby's nurse's bag, and a few items are in it, one of them being an enema bag. That's how they took care of things back then. But we do have some of her things, as we do have some items from Dr. Ezel also, which are up here on the top of the safe. And we have Dr. Ezel's doctor's white coat, and it's actually in the safe.
Oh,
And he was the latest that came.
I think there was a dentist who used to come here too.
Oh, there was a dentist here. There was an eye doctor came here
And they're not-
in the back of the Tomasi room. As you turn the corner to come up this way, there was a little room. He would be there like 2 days a week, maybe part days. He came from Granville. Okay. Can't remember his name. But what was the other one you just mentioned?
Well, dentist was...
Dentist was Ned Stahn's, not Ned Stahn, Vernon Stahn's brother. And his wife taught at the school. She taught second grade, I think. And he lived where, well, Peter Carolyn has now rehabilitated 3 houses on William Street. The first one is where his office was. And everybody was terrified of the dentist, not the wife.
What grade did you teach, Jack?
Did she teach?
You.
Oh, I taught 5th grade, 6th grade, and 8th grade. I had it was 6, 7, and 8 actually. 1 year down there because I wasn't certified and they couldn't get a math teacher. And I loved it and I was going to pursue that and I didn't. I pursued administration and then found out was all that was kicked to me. I decided to stay in the classroom. But
Where was the school?
which school?
Where you were?
On the island, East Mauritius.
Oh, you came from Long Island.
No, Here.
East Mauritius is on Long Island.
Yeah, I came from Salem. I came back to Salem
Oh, but you taught on Long
53
Island?
years ago,
In East
yeah,
Mauritius?
3 years. I was lucky enough to teach where my wife came to get her
Okay.
training.
Was there a school here though, in Salem?
Was the school here?
Yeah,
Yeah, it was here.
there was a school.
Yeah, oh yeah. It was a
School's been
darn
here
nice
forever,
school,
isn't it?
one of the nicest ones
Where
around.
it is now, the same school?
Yeah,
Just the main
it's-
building.
there are phases of it.
Okay.
The main building was 38 or 39 and the primary,
Because it's a beautiful school. Well
yeah,
kept.
and it's kept beautiful too.
Yeah.
I coached a little bit over there, and after a game one night, one of the referees came out of the dressing room and he said, "Do you work here?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, I hope you're proud of this place." He said, "I go in and out of schools every day," and he said, "I've never seen one so nice and clean as this one."
Well, we say that today because of Women's Health Day. We
Yeah,
hold it there. It's beautiful.
it's still that way, isn't
Oh,
it?
yeah. What's the connection to Audubon? There are a lot of Audubon pictures in that school.
Across the street.
Yeah, that brick house across from the funeral home,
Yeah.
that was one of the Audubon's homes.
And they got the artwork from them.
It may have come from there, I would assume so. But probably was given to the school when they built the school there. It used to be a Parker, was that who it was, Al? Parker had the racetrack out back of his home.
Well, actually, it was down that way. It was not in back of the house, but it was down East Broadway on the right side is where he had his track. Yeah, Congressman Parker inherited the house through his wife, who was a Williams. And then when schools were centralized and you had a lot of WPA money around from the Depression, Salem was offered a huge amount of money to build a new school, and they accepted that offer. The Williamses and the Audubons and a few other families were very prominent in Salem. The Audubon house ended up in the Audubon family because Maria Audubon taught in a private school in New York City. Her friend and principal of that school retired, and they loved Salem. They used to come here for summers, and they ended up buying that house. So in that house you had daughter-in-laws and grandchildren of John Audubon, and that's the connection. And when they came, they built a whole new wing to house his works in the house, and that's why some of Audubon's originals are still here, such as those in the school. Those are uncolored, but those are original.
Right.
Who remembers anything about the shirt shop? That seems to have been one of the biggest businesses in town.
I worked there.
Oh, good. Tell us about it.
My first job, when I was old enough to get working papers, the man's name is Mr. Balls hired me to work there, and because I was so young, he wanted me to try all the different kinds of jobs that they had there. I started out with ironing. They made nightgowns and pajamas and stuff like that at the time. Before that, they'd made beautiful shirts, I think. It had a long history before I ever got there. The women who worked there were friendly, and they were helpful. They tried to teach me what I needed to know to do the different jobs around there. And there was one, and I think it was Ann Laurie, if I'm not mistaken, sang while she worked. So if you were in the room where she was working, you were serenaded. And she had a beautiful voice. I've never had a job like that since.
About how big was the working staff? Do you remember?
Probably, I don't think there were 30 people there. Not a lot. It was toward the end of its useful life, I guess, as a shirt shop. But it was a good place to work, and as I look back on it, I realized that Mr. Baltz gave me the job because he was friends with my parents, not because I had any special skills or anything.
Did you learn to iron?
I learned how not to iron. You fold it a certain way, you know?
Were you on all the floors? Were there different floors
Yeah.
for different?
Yeah, there was one whole floor that seemed to be only turning collars, you know?
Oh.
You turn them inside out so that they look nice, and a whole lot of people were doing that. You were paid piecework. So whatever you were able to complete that day, that's what you got paid for, not by time, so.
Could I stay on the ironing thing? Because I'm sitting here remembering my mother ironing, always ironing. To me, that's such a skill. Can you want to talk about that a little bit? I'm sure there was a lot of ironing in your family.
But I'll start with the store. There was a big table that you worked on, not an ironing board like what we're used to in our homes. The iron was attached to something over your head so that you weren't dragging the cord back and forth across what you were ironing. I was at the station where you took the article of clothing and you folded it a certain way so that it would fit in the bag that would show it off the best. And that's the only part we ironed. But it usually was the fussy part. So, you took a little bit of time to do that. But I got so I could do that pretty well, and the people were so nice to work around. And just everybody was. But, as I've grown older, I realized that's Salem. It's a friendly place. So, the ironing, since then, ironing at home, nowhere near the fun.
Well, Jack, did you do any ironing?
No, I wasn't blessed with that skill.
What about memories of Jacko's going to Jackley?
Yeah. That's why I don't smoke. I never smoked. The doctors are always amazed that I lived at the time that I didn't smoke. But I had a choice to make. I could have a Coca-Cola at Jacko's or I could buy some cigarettes. And I opted for the Coca-Cola. There was no wisdom involved.
So Jacko's.
Jacko's, yeah. I took my granddaughter in there when she was about 3 years old because he was still there, just so she could see it. Yeah. And so he could see her. Because he loved seeing the offspring and the grandchildren of the people who used to go in there all the time. I mean, it was right on the corner from the school. My mother was in that shop across the street, so around I went. It was a good place for kids. It was safe.
His mirror was covered with graduation pictures.
Exactly.
Years and years.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep.
Jack, I'm sure you went to Jacko's. I understand there was a back room with a pool table in it. Were you part of that group?
Yes. I was probably the fourth or fifth generation of that.
Questions? Must be
What
other.
about going to school in Salem? Wait, was it the little school or the new school or?
It was the center building of the
Okay.
school the way it is now.
They're not that old.
Well, we are. Going to school here was a blessing we didn't know it was when we were kids. I feel like I've had the best education New York State could offer. Not only in Salem, but also I went to state colleges. So I really think Salem prepared me for those further schools. We had good teachers. And we had some fun teachers that were both also fun, but also good. They always seemed to care about the students. I had a couple of, or about a year of substitute teaching here in the middle to late 70s. And some of the teachers were still there that had taught when I was there. And the atmosphere in the teacher's lounge was different from when I was a kid, but it was still friendly Salem. So, yeah, this is a great place to grow up.
Did you have Laura Lytle? I hear stories about Laura Lytle.
No, I did
She
not.
before your time. I know she was here in the 40s during the war, but
Yeah, no, that was before. I didn't get to school till,
We landed in
what?
during the war.
Yeah.
we
were born
during a polite way to say it.
You guys were classmates, right? So
Yeah.
you graduated together. Did you guys know each other when you were in elementary school?
Yeah.
I mean,
It
you
was
have
a small
stories
town.
from playing all up
We used to
through
throw
Salem.
snowballs at each other.
Can you tell us a couple stories from like elementary school, middle school, and high school?
I don't know if we can do that. She was always getting A's and I wasn't. Let's just put it that way.
I'm listening.
You have to realize we lived on the other opposite side of the street for a lot of those elementary years. And kids were kids. We would sometimes get into fights, and sometimes we would just play well together. When the boys got old enough to do the kind of sports that they played, then there was the activity was around the sports. Girls basketball, as you know, was loads of fun. You could only use half the court. You couldn't even get a run.
Bump, bump, bump.
Yeah, the rules were so that we wouldn't overextend ourselves. Have you seen the Phillips granddaughters? Yeah, it's
Totally different.
that's the way it was though. I could be a cheerleader and get physical exercise that way. So I would be one of the ones watching the game, and Jack would be one of the ones playing the game. And I distinctly remember one football game when he got carried off the field on a stretcher.
Oh.
So, you know, when your friends get hurt, you feel it. So
what happened, Jack?
I was watching the ball instead of the guy going to catch it. One of those deals. That was my freshman year, I think.
didn't stop you from playing.
I learned a lesson.
Did you play every year?
Yeah.
How many were in your graduating class?
26.
Good question.
That is a good question. Yeah.
That's
More than now.
I was gonna say I think there was 35 last year that graduated.
Yeah, ours was especially small class even for the time. Most of the classes were around us were a little bit more populated, but we had only 10 girls in the class. And you're friends with everybody when the class is that small, and you do stuff together.
What year did you graduate?
1960.
60.
Mm-hmm.
What were the other activities you could participate in? Were there prom? Did you have a prom back then? Did you have a French club or,
We had we have a prom. We had there was a debate club for a little while, but that didn't really go anywhere. A lot of my activities were connected to the church, and I was just realizing today. I went to the church in the brick church that's now the Fort Salem Theater, and I wasn't aware of it, but it seems like I spent a lot of time doing stuff that the church was doing too. That, they kept kids playing, and as we got older, there was a youth group, and one of the teachers from the high school was the adult responsible for the kids in the youth group. So those things were kind of combined too. So a lot of our time growing up was spent in small groups too, like that, and confirmation class, and any of the things that the churches did for youth. So I remember hay rides and stuff like that. But before we graduated from high school, the white church and the brick church merged. So, and that would have been like 1959, I think maybe they did around then. And then, so we started going to church there, and by then I was old enough to teach the littlest kids. So that's what good Presbyterian girls did when they got to be teenagers, is they taught little kids.
We had a photography club for a few years when we were in probably junior high and high school. And it was in the old science lab around the corner. There was a little room in there, and we had the chemicals and paper and things. We could go in there on our recess and develop film. So I remember doing that. Once again, it was Frank Converse who had that club. So I don't know how long it lasted.
Was there FFA back then? It was a
Yes.
big ag program.
Yeah,
No girls in it though.
trying to think of who was ag.
Was Bill Flint?
Gil
Flint.
Bill Flint.
Yeah,
Did you
yeah,
go up here?
Yeah.
yeah.
Go up here? No.
Hal, there's one thing I
Oh, but, yeah.
want to point out at that time. Every time that there's any kind of if the kids are putting on a play or something, the whole community was in that auditorium. The whole area was very, very supportive of all activity. When you play basketball, the court is full. The community was very friendly, and they were all supportive. And some of the kid teachers that I met at K's were absolutely phenomenal. They were really good. So they had a wonderful place to grow up and live.
You know, one of the things that I picked up almost immediately when Sarah Jane and I and my family moved to Salem in '65, and we hit town and we're walking down Main Street just looking around, and people would say, "Are you here to apply for the job?" I guess there weren't too many strangers in town at that time. And I think Charlie Perry had the same experience.
Yeah.
I went to Jacko's and he took one look and he said, "You must be applying to be the new coach."
But immediately he said, "This is a friendly place." People said hi. We have no idea who they would say. "Hello, how you doing? You know, welcome to Salem." I said, "Fine," but I think that just reinforces everything that everybody is saying tonight, that the community and the school, we all watched out for each other.
I think so, yeah.
And it was a great atmosphere to raise kids. People still ask me about Salem. I said, it's a great place to raise your family.
It still is.
Yes.
You know, it is,
I
yeah.
have a little twist on that. People would say, "Oh, you must be Jack's wife." It was a while before I had a name.
Yeah, I was the same thing. I was
Yeah.
Jimmy's.
Yeah,
You must be Jimmy Sheldon's wife.
That didn't happen to Bob. He knew every farmer and from here to, I don't know where, he was out delivering feed to the farmers in the whole area, so he knew more people than I did.
That was a time when everybody had little small farms, and they would basically, a lot of them wouldn't come into town till Friday night. But I took the feed out to their different farms, and I had a great visit with them. But I took it all the way up Route 30, 7 or 8 bags of feed, whatever. But I got the best stories. And Bee's Diner used to be right there where the Snappa place is here. And that used to fill right up. And people would be telling stories in that diner. That was a place that you found out what was going on. And we told stories that you wouldn't believe. But the thing is, they look forward to me being out there to bring them some kind of news, what's going on in town. And I had fun. It was great fun for me.
Being just Kate's husband. Yeah, how about that?
The one thing that pops into my mind is the word honesty, and if I could just tell this story. The Hankses used to have chickens, and they would sell eggs, and Jane, that was Jane's money. Her chicken, her egg money.
Yes.
But anyway, she'd sell, the cracks were always cheaper than the whole, so she'd have a sign out there, cracks 25 cents and so on. And a couple who lived here in the village would go out to get their eggs, I won't name them. And so the wife went in to get the eggs and came back out and opened up the egg carton and said, "Uh-oh," and slammed it back down and got out of the car and ran back to the hen house to And then she came back and her husband said, why did you do that? She said, well, I opened up the box to see the eggs and there were cracks, so I went back in to crack them. And by the way, Jane Hanks just turned 104 years old. In case you didn't know that.
God bless her.
Yeah. Please, other questions? I think there's a lot of information that's yet to come out.
Did your class run a senior class play? Do you remember it?
Yes, we did.
You had the lead,
Oh,
Romeo?
one of our,
I
yeah,
don't remember the storyline either.
there was a piece of music that one of the professors in the college wrote, and he got famous. And anyway, Eddie Wood wrote a song that we could use for that. We didn't have to use somebody else's song. He wrote the song. He's one of our classmates, and he played the guitar. So he provided the music that was kind of the center of the story. And the story was about the professor getting famous, but I don't remember any more details than that. And it was intended to be funny. I was in the play. I blew my best line, so I didn't have a hope of being a movie star in my future. It's a good thing it wasn't anything I wanted. But yeah, we did. We had a class play. We also published a yearbook with the seniors on the staff of the yearbook doing the planning and stuff. But everybody in the school that wanted to participate in that particular activity could. They didn't have to be seniors.
Was there like a favorite teacher that you had, or maybe a least favorite teacher? You don't have to say names, but like, what was the experience like? If you had a really good one or a really
Well, we had
hard one?
We had a lot of good teachers, but I'm going to tell you about one that played a big part in my life because he introduced me to Bob. Al Rusak lived in a boarding house in town, and he taught English and history in the junior high school, in the high school.
Yeah, junior.
Yeah, and when Bob first came to town, he stayed in the same rooming house and until he could, find a place of his own. And Al introduced Bob to me because he brought him to the youth fellowship at the church because Al was the sponsor for that. And so he's my favorite for that reason. But we had a lot of really good teachers. I think probably Frank Converse.
It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, he was. And John Terry would spend enormous amounts of times with his students to make sure they understood the math, because some people just don't automatically get math.
He wanted you to come to his house for help if you needed it.
Yeah.
So there were a couple times when I went down there.
It was like open house as far as he was concerned. He wanted you to learn.
Yeah.
And they spent time after school, during school. Yeah. That's what it was like. It's like we had the benefits of the small size of the class for one thing. Our math classes the higher math seldom had any more than 10 kids, so. School was so small that they took, you got chemistry one year and physics the next year in the science department. There weren't enough kids to teach both of those classes, so.
And Frank Converse comes up again. When he first came here on Monday morning, he'd get a football uniform from the coach and drag it up the stairs with him to his classroom and fumble for his keys and open the door and so on. And everybody's, what's with the football uniform? Well, he said, I didn't have time to take him home. I just came up on the train from New York yesterday and I had to bring him right to school with me. I was late. He was implying that he would played with the Giants on Sunday afternoon. He was a corker.
Did you walk home for lunch from school?
Yes, we did.
Yeah.
So there weren't cafeteria services at the
Oh,
time?
they had it.
They did have it for those that were from out of town.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you could if you, but I lived on Main Street, so it was kind of handy.
Yeah, and we didn't walk around. We walked right through the fields.
Yeah,
Yeah.
behind, yeah.
Yeah, behind there.
Used to run on the rails, the track rails.
Well, that was safe.
Yeah, we ran to and from.
Jack, you mentioned that you did a little coaching. Define little. Define little as coaching. Seems like you did more than a little.
Well, I started out down in the Catskills because I wanted to coach, and that was the only place I could find an opening. And I got a JV job and coached 2 years there, and then moved down to Long Island and coached only 1 year there because I refereed the next 2 years. And then I came upstate and coached in Hartford. And the next year I was in Salem coaching. And Gil had said to me, you should probably not coach, but I think you're going to have to because we need a coach. So I coached junior high, and then I coached again later. I think there were 3 or 4 years that I didn't coach, and then I coached some for several years with Jack Barber. So.
And some of these folks may not know what sport you're talking about.
Mostly basketball. I did coach 4 or 5 years or more of baseball too. It, kind of the frosting on the cake.
It was just boys on the team then?
Yeah, we did have softball for the girls
Uh-huh.
in the spring, and we did have basketball for the girls of the new variety where they used the whole court. And so,
Yeah, real basketball.
And they played other schools then?
yeah, they did. They played this. When the boys would go to Cambridge, for instance, the Cambridge girls would come up here, and then when we would just switch, and we had Argyle and Hartford up Fort Ann, Granville, Greenwich, Hoosick Falls, Hoosick Valley, Stillwater. So we played a lot of basketball. Tamarack.
Tamarack came later.
That was a long drive.
Yeah, it came later, after I left school, back in the 60s. You must have, when did they come in? I thought they came in
Well,
the year after I left.
No, it was a little longer than that. When we started out in the 60s, we had really the old Washington County League, and then Argyle, Fort Ann, and Hartford all left. And at that time, Tamarack came in. And I'm not sure just whether, but that was like 3 or 4 years after I started.
Was it?
Yeah,
It was Brittenkill. I'd see that in the newspaper and I'd say,
yeah, same thing, yeah.
never heard of it.
Yeah. And when I went down to watch our girls play in the sectionals this year, I went down past that school because we went down to Averville Park and watched the girls down there. But basically, they just had play days for the girls in the early 60s. And it was really pretty much the 70s before we got into scholastics with the girls. And Gay Gilbert, who taught physical education with me, she was Methodist minister's wife, was really a proponent of it, but she didn't really get it started. But Lynn Barado came in and she did. She got it going and coached both field hockey and track and had outstanding teams actually. And actually one of the basketball teams early on, the girls basketball teams, which most people, they won the sectionals. And we have banners in the school now for all the sectional basketball teams that they've had since the new wing got put on. And they're gonna be putting up a new banner this year for that team, because it never got put up.
Oh, that's good.
They're also gonna put a new banner up, I believe, for 1,000-point scorers for the boys. There's one up for the girls already, but I believe they're gonna put one up that has the boys' names on it too. That's what I heard.
We have a few minutes left for some final last questions or comments.
Go ahead. Trying to speak. Well, you said you were a cheerleader. Do you remember any of your cheers?
Of course. No, I don't do any of them.
But they have the little song that goes with it.
The only song we had was the anthem,
The
the school's
You
anthem.
know, rah, rah, rah.
Did you have uniforms
Yes,
for
we did.
cheerleaders?
Yeah.
Did you have short pleated skirts?
For the football team, yeah. Well, for the basketball games, we had what amounted to dresses. They're
Really?
all one piece, lined. Well, sometimes you were upside down, so
Yeah.
they needed to be lined.
Do you remember your dad being a bus driver?
I do.
'Cause I remember him.
You remember him?
He picked us up. He lived on the cemetery farm.
Uh-huh.
He was my bus driver when I was a wee tot.
Yeah. He used to pick up Meg Sutherland. And I remember him saying that she was his favorite passenger because he just had a soft spot in his heart for that cute little girl. She was so polite and so nice.
One of the last ones he picked up would be Bob Thompson's daughter, but I can't remember her first name.
Carol,
She
maybe?
was- you pick her up on the way into town.
Yeah. I'm not sure of her name, but there was a Carol Thompson anyway. No, there was a younger sister that sang.
There was 3 girls.
Yeah, and the little one sang. Because one year at the Christmas choral thing, that she sang, I saw Mommy kissing Santa Claus. She's just a little girl at the time. Can't remember. I know
Carol was the second one.
she was the second one. Yeah, I've forgotten the.
Janice was the first one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Was there anything particular that kept you guys friends all these years?
We might as well be related. Well, I didn't have any big brothers, so I had Jack.
You didn't have any sisters.
That's right.
There you go.
Yeah, so
Oh, you answered the question.
yeah. We've been friends for a long time, and I was prepared to dislike whoever Jack married.
Well, that came out of the woodwork.
That's some of that dirty
I got lucky though. I got a new friend out of it. So yeah. We did have a good time together.
You were talking about busing. Was there always busing in Salem, or when did they start that?
I don't remember when there wasn't.
Well, when I worked on the programs in the late 50s and early 60s, the buses were housed in a barn out here by I guess it's a well out there, isn't it, Charlie? Well, now the Circle, because the high school was added on to that. But you remember those big trees growing around that brick well?
Yeah.
We used to put a shoe in the door out there after dark, so we could, on our way home, so we could get back in there and play.
Oh.
I had a funny story when your brother was playing JV basketball for me, Ted.
Ted?
And he went up and he got a rebound. And that's back in the old gym, of course. And I'm sitting there because it was crowded. And I said, put it back up. And it was the wrong basket. And he went up to shoot it, and then he realized, no, it's going up. He didn't know, so it was kind of funny.
That's the first time I've heard him admit a mistake as a coach.
Patience is a virtue, Al.
He was
Well,
also on the football team that we won the league too.
Are you the one that put the weights on his ankles so he would jump up?
I don't know, we had ankle weights for all the kids at one time.
Yeah, because I remember my mom talking about it. Ted had to have weights on his ankles because he couldn't get into the air like everybody else. He didn't have the same springs on his legs, I guess.
Well, our time is up, and I want to thank Kay Russell and Jack Phillips for the entertaining story. And watch your local internet. I think Tom will be putting this up sometime soon, so you can hear us and see us again. So again, I thank you for coming. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for